The martyrdom and persecution of Vietnamese Catholics since the 16th century, as well as the French desire to match the riches and glory of our arch-rival Lady Britannia, would manifest itself into the colony of French Indochina in the latter end of the 19th century. Thusly, having the pretenses of protecting Vietnam's Catholic population and wishing to match Lady Britannia, the French would attack. And in the late summer of 1858, under Admiral Rigaud de Colonial, the port city of Toulon was quickly captured, but would be placed under siege. With the garrison being left behind, the French would head south in February the following year, capturing the city of Saigon the same month. The French campaign would falter due to Vietnamese resistance. However, the defense was futile, and the war culminated in the 1862 Treaty of Saigon, seeing the former ceding Cochinchina to the French, the ending of Catholic persecution, and further cessations. The French would exert more influence over two Dutch lands, and in 1867 the French would take more southern lands due to accusing him of supporting resistance groups. The French would attack Hanoi in 1873, forcing the Second Treaty of Saigon, 1874, ceding more to the French. The last stance against the total colonization of Indochina would be firstly made by the Black Flag Army, then China itself. The Sino-French War of 1884 to 1885 was a complete French victory, culminating in the Treaty of Dien. The victorious French would declare the union between the Indochinese Sea, and in the year 1893, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos were all part of French Indochina. The French would implement a series of reforms, seeking the assimilation of the Indochinese people. Impact of the French: Number 1. Coercive power. Number 2. Export-oriented economy. Number 3. Transformation of Vietnamese society. A cash economy. A divide between the colonial urban elite and rural villages. Number 4. Political repression. For example, Vietnam had become the third biggest exporter of rice, exporting even the surplus, resulting in famine. All of this manifested into discontentment towards the colonial agenda. Change was surely to come. Ho Chi Minh was born in 1890 in Han Thu, and as he aged, he became fixated on the future of Vietnam. While in Europe, he had dialogue with the communists of the continent, even having it with Trotsky and Stalin of the USSR in 1924. He then went to southern China and formed the Thanh Nhan Katmandon Chi Hoi in 1925, which consisted of Vietnamese students who wished to inform the world of the woes of French Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh would help found the first Indochinese Communist Party, having not the main objective of seizing the means of production nor of establishing a moneyless society, but rather the independence of Vietnam. On May 10, 1940, Operation Fall Gap would commence, and the subjugation of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, the Kingdom of Belgium, and finally the French Third Republic was the result. At the same time, Japanese longed dearly for land and resource, as well as a leg up in the war with China. So thusly, in July 1940, the Japanese government adopted a new policy. They would win the war in China by blocking supplies reaching the Chinese through British Burma and French Indochina, and they would gain control of the resources of Malaya and the East Indies by war if necessary. The Japanese now shared power with the French, keeping the colonial governor-general, Admiral Jean Ducou, and the French troops, although this contradicted their claim of being the liberator of Asia. As anyone who has played the video game Hearts of Iron 4, Hoi, would be aware of the quantities of rubber French Indochina possesses. A new era for Indochina had just dawned. Ho Chi Minh would return to Indochina in 1941. Following 23 years of absence, he would set up the
Việt Nam Độc lập Đồng minh,
or shortened Viet Minh, the same year, formed the peasants, merchants, and soldiers who would rebel, creating a liberated zone in northern Vietnam, ironically being given weapons, military intelligence, and even a declaration from the red, white, and blue. The Japanese and French were not without conflict, however.
The Battle of Lang Son in September 1940 made the inferiority of the French military undeniable. While Japan and France were still negotiating the stationing of Japanese troops in northern Indochina, a Japanese unit stationed by the border in China decided to enter Indochina on its own authority and decisively defeated the French brigade. Due to this incident, the French saw no other alternative than to seek coexistence with Japan. Minor conflicts often broke out between them. The exact number of such conflicts is unknown, but about 20 were recorded in Cochin, China, between a 1-month period from December 1943 to January 1944.
Side note: Thailand had invaded Indochina in the latter end of 1940 and earlier part of 1941, known as the Franco-Thai War, with the result being Thailand gain. And the relations would in March 1945 lead to a successful Japanese coup due to the suspicion of French betrayal, that of switching sides to join the Allied cause. The Japanese were in a horrendous situation, even more so by August, and the Emperor himself announced the surrender on the 15th of August in his Dual Voice broadcast, giving the Viet Minh a prime opportunity to take control of Vietnam, culminating in the August Revolution. The Viet Minh quickly advanced, capturing the cities of Hanoi, Hue, and Saigon. The withdrawing Japanese would even aid the Viet Minh, and Bao Dai, the emperor, would even abdicate due to communist demands. Independence for Vietnam was declared on the 2nd of September by Ho Chi Minh, delivering a grand speech in Hanoi.
Hỡi đồng bào cả nước, tất cả mọi người đều sinh ra có quyền bình đẳng, tạo hóa cho họ những quyền không ai có thể xâm phạm được. Trong những quyền ấy có quyền được sống, quyền tự do và quyền mưu cầu hạnh phúc. Lời bất hủ ấy ở trong bản tuyên ngôn độc lập năm 1776 của nước Mỹ.
Another example of his early love for America is what he said to an American RSS agent. He would welcome 1 million American soldiers, but no French. Side note: Japan would officially sign the instrument of surrender on board the USS Missouri on the same day, the 2nd of September 1945. The French tricolor was once raised again, flying proudly and resiliently on top of one of Saigon's public buildings, following newly freed French soldiers' attack on the city. The Vietnamese' great success would crumble away, losing Cochinchina to the south and Hanoi, along with the north, to nationalist Chinese forces, numbering almost 200,000 men. The Indo-Chinese Communist Party was dissolved to please occupying nationalists, and the British aided the French in order to serve the interest of keeping the crown jewel of India. Ho Chi Minh, without any allies and in a dire situation, signed the Accord of Ho Senti on March 6, 1946. Northern Vietnam could remain an autonomous self-governing state, provided the Vietnamese permit French troops there for a period of 5 years. The South would remain under French control. Ho reluctantly signed the agreement. In the accord was a French concession of holding a public referendum for the 3 provinces of Vietnam to be united with one another, referring to Cochinchina, Annam, and Tonkin. The referendum was still not arranged by the end of March, and in spite, the Viet Minh attacked the French once again. The French remained stubborn, and the Fontainebleau agreements would occur in the summer of 1946 between the two. It amounted to nothing. However, in September, Ho Chi Minh would negotiate a Modus Vivendi, an arrangement or agreement allowing conflicting parties to coexist peacefully, either indefinitely or until a final settlement is reached, resulting in a season of hostilities and shared commissions on military and economic relations, taking effect the date before All Hallows Eve, October 30th, 1946. France still wanted her colony, but to keep it, she would have to stand and fight. And fight she did. A French patrol ship traverses the Gulf of Tonkin and attempts to seize a Chinese vessel. Vietnamese authorities intervene, provoking the wrath of the French, who subsequently attacked and took the city of Ho Chi Minh. This work of retaliation further escalated tensions, and after attacks, one against the other, the First Indo-Chinese War would break out on the 19th of December, 1946. Side note: Ho Chi Minh still wished for peace, but the telegrams he sent would arrive only a day after the war broke out. Hanoi was quickly captured by the French, and the Vietnam drew back to the mountains. The guerrillas would produce many woes for the colonials in the warrior countryside of Vietnam. But the French had not been idle and launched Operation Leah in October 1947. The operation utilizing over 1,000 paratroopers and some 15,000 men from the Corps Expeditionnaire Français en Extrême Orient. The four was to clear the Vietnamese hierarchy in the Bac-Can base, where the latter would flank the scrambling Vietnamese, then thrash them. The operation bore some fruit, taking some 9,000 Vietnamese, but more would evade the French. But the French and Vietnamese had foreign support. For the Vietnamese, the newfound victorious communists in China provided weapons and equipment, as well as offering them training and military actions. On the other hand, the strongly anti-communist Americans would, over the course of the war, give around $2.6 billion, 70% of the French war expenditure, and contemplated using their air power on the Vietnamese. The French, wrought with their progress, needed to do something drastic, and it was vested in the emperor in exile Bao Dao. But he resisted only to return if the French assured him that Vietnam would be unified and independent. This would culminate in the Élysée Accords in the March of 1949, giving an illusion of independence for Vietnam. The French retained control of foreign, military, along with financial policy. The new government of Bao Dai created the Vietnamese National Army, also known as the VNA. By 1952, it consisted of over 100,000 men and served alongside the French. The Viet Minh, in the same year, failed to restore the supply lines. General Giap, along with Ho Chi Minh, saw the failures. Thus, he decided to move Viet Minh resources to Laos, stretching the French, causing the infamous Battle of Dien Bien Phu.
The huge importance of Dien Bien Phu for France and its army was almost incalculable. The great significance of these events was the way in which, imperceptibly at first, but then increasingly inevitably, Vietnam changed from a French colonial battleground to one on which the United States chose to make its stand against what General Matthew B. Ridgway called the dead existence of a godless world.
In 1953, the fortress of Dien Bien Phu was established in an isolated location requiring supplies by airdrop. Seeing the vulnerable position, General Giap pondered on an attack, one that would be decisive. Tens of thousands of Vietnamese troops moved to the area alongside the artillery, and in March 1954, on the 13th, the battle would commence. On the 13th, Vietnamese artillery devastated both the French soldiers and airfield at the so-called Camp Beatrice. Following, Vietnamese troops under the Masque de Nuit descended the hills outside the fortress, and for the next 20 days, ferocious fighting ensued. The French position was unenvious due to being highly outnumbered, lacking troops with combat training, and being held under siege. The battle would become an odd replica of the Great War battlefield, with both sides having flooded trenches of mud and water. The French were bloodied and battered by early May, and the Vietnamese would make the final assault against only some 3,000 able-bodied Frenchmen. 20,000 Vietnamese would start the attack on the 7th of May. The French had finally been defeated. The French tricolor was thrown down and was replaced by the red banner stitched with a golden star, with cheers of their kin rejoicing. But the Vietnamese victory at Dien Bien Phu was not without woe and bloodshed, sustaining some 23,000 casualties. In addition, the Vietnamese had to care for almost 11,000 captured French. These men had to then march hundreds of kilometers. Only half would arrive at their destination. The victory at Dien Bien Phu was a decisive turning point, furthering French wishes to withdraw from Vietnam and weakening the position in the 1954 Geneva Conference. A country occupied by a foreign empire before and during the Second World War, communists and anti-communists at tension, and division along a parallel. Some might think of the forgotten war in Korea, as the excellent YouTuber Mortal Republic puts it. But alas, this was the fate of Vietnam, as decided in the July of 1954 at Geneva. Vietnam's old compatriots in the Indochinese Union would be given independence as the Kingdom of Laos and Kingdom of Cambodia in 1949, years before the bloodshed in Vietnam would end. Bao Dao would be removed, a republic formed with Ngo Dien Bien now at the helm, whom would say another more deadly war was still yet to come. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed and gained some knowledge. I'd like to express my gratitude to the YouTubers Claywolf and Paxlock. Both are great channels. Check them out. With all that being said, long live the Flemish Kingdom, and God bless.
Most of the fighting was in Vietnam, which includes 3 of the 5 countries comprising pre-war French Indochina. Finally, on June 14, 1949, the independent state of Vietnam, under Bao Dai, former Emperor of Annam, was recognized by the French as independent, but existing within the French Union. But to the natives of Vietnam, even this limited form of independence under a leader who did as directed by the French was some improvement over pre-war French colonial rule. The age-old countries of Cochin China, Annam, and Tonkin, united as the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, embarked on a new era in the history of Southeast Asia, a period which bore only surface resemblances to the era which ended in Asia with World War II. This new day was inaugurated in Vietnam as elsewhere throughout Asia with warfare. The most urgent task facing the French and Vietnamese was the job of containing the advances of communist Viet Minh forces, which were operating in strong guerrilla groups throughout Vietnam